let y'all get started. And who would like to begin?
Where do you want to start?
Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
We're here to listen.
Okay,
to
well
Rob.
let's start on this SUP issue and figure out what we're going to do on these SUPs to get some kind of authority to cease and desist these things without a giant legal battle and costing the county millions of dollars. I mean, I've spoke with Jeff about it. I'm like, you guys let them run wild for 10 years without a review. Everybody wants term limits. Let's put a term limit on these SUPs. 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. We review them.
Wait. If you have a cabinet shop out in the county, you've been doing it for 20 years, no problem, no complaints, no nothing. You have a little small engine repair shop out in the county, no problems, no one's complained. Why create the extra bureaucracy and make those folks have to come in and go in front of you guys or us if everything's good? And we've approved it, and it's no problem. I think the ones you're talking about are the exceptional cases, and especially the large cases.
And that's true, but we can't pick out the large cases, just those. You can't pick on the big guy if you don't make the little guy do the same thing. And I get we have cabinet shops. We got a diesel guy right out in District 1, no complaints. So what would be the problem of you coming in? You never had a complaint. Say, hey, I want to renew my SUP. We don't charge you anything. We just say, yeah, no complaints. We can hear 10 a month.
We were trying to streamline it so we had less government.
Well, and I get that, but it's a yay or no. Hey, no complaints? Yes, your SUP's.
Well, especially if they're not following what they turn in. Like it's totally different than what they said, and nobody regulates it. If you ask them why are you doing this, is it, well, nobody checks on it, so I'll do what I want with it.
Well, that's accepted. I mean, if they're not following it, now it triggers the requirement that it comes back.
I think what Brad's trying to say is, we used to have, I think there were 3-year, what were the SUPs, 5-year SUPs, and they were have to come back in, and they were even paying for a while road impact fees over again, and we decided less government. Why do they come in when 99% of the SUPs are not a problem? But the 1% that are problems, we didn't feel like they needed to come back in the 99%, so we made them indefinite unless there's a problem. So it says that in the regulation that we changed to make them indefinite. That's not the end of it. The final sentence in that resolution says, unless there's a problem. So what we got to do is figure out how do we make sure the 1% that are problems are revocable. If we made them indefinite, then we got to figure out a way to make sure.
We just saw we can't revoke it. I mean, our attorneys will say, we got.
And the problem with that is
let it go, guys. Let it go.
Because anybody can sue anybody for anything.
Exactly.
If they're dead wrong or don't have a case to.
And then I suppose you have to define what is a problem. Is it one person complaining? Is it someone from the county going out there and looking at it? What defines that problem?
Yeah. But if we're going to make them indefinite, we've got to make sure we do have a way to revoke them.
We've never revoked one.
No, not in the history of the county. So, yeah, we've never revoked the SUP. And some of them should be revoked. So, I mean, we got to figure out either legally what legal terminology you can put in. Public nuisance, I don't even know if that's going to work. If they're deemed a public nuisance, then we'll have to have a court hearing. And Mr. Culbertson's right. Anybody can sue anybody for anything. But with the term limit, when your time's up, you're done. There's no question. Sue me, but your time's up.
Yeah. So if we can't make sure we can't revoke them,
then you'll get sued because you didn't renew it.
Right. So if we can't revoke them, then we need to change the unlimited back to a limit.
Or just don't issue special use permits any longer and just do rezoning.
And
Well,
we've issued
that might be what needs to happen. Then that's a lot of spot zoning.
Well, but
But there's at least a good public hearing on that for a rezone for a business.
I'm not sure. Can you spot zone legally?
You can.
I don't think you can. I don't believe.
You can. Yeah, you
not
can.
recommended.
It's hard to do, but you can do it.
But
But it's not ideal.
No. you are also creating a property right for the neighbor that lives right next to
And the problem I have with rezoning, spot zoning, is then you don't control what they're going to do on it. You rezone it to business, it could be any business. It could be an automotive, or it could be a strip club, or it could be whatever. You don't control then what type of business goes in. Where an SUP is more specific to what's going to be there.
And if we do an SUP right, it's more restrictive because we can put the conditions.
If you do it right.
If
So,
people comply with the conditions.
is there anything we need to do different to do it to where we can make sure they are revocable? If not, we need to go back to 2-year limits or something.
I don't think, depending on provisions that say we will do whatever KDHE says,
No.
is a good idea.
You can't trust the state. We already see that. So,
We
And
haven't had good
speaking
experience.
of, here's another issue I wanted to bring up. I'm not going to sign off on any more SUPs that rely on KDHE for policing health, safety, and public environment. So we need to figure out, do we need to build in KDHE's regulations in our own writing in our SUP at the county level? Or I thought it was assumed that those are part of our SUP automatically because we say follow KDHE regulations. So even if KDHE doesn't enforce them, do we need to put those in our SUPs, or can we continue to say you have to follow KDHE regulations even if they don't enforce them? Though those are part of the SUP.
I don't know. What do you think, Planner?
I don't think you should.
Where's David at?
It's also illegal.
well, I mean, is there a legal guideline that says we as a county cannot make our own regulations on C&D landfills, rubble landfills? I mean, you guys are the commissioners. I think you guys ought to be able to determine what we're going to let go in the county and what we're going to say no to.
But the problem is we're not the experts when it comes to like the KDHE regulations. If you go through their regulations, we wouldn't have a way to even know about some of those.
Well, and their
We're not
regulations are
engineers
so.
or health experts or anything. They're supposed to do. That's why we set it up this way. But when that's not working, what do we do now?
Well, and they're so vague anyway, Mr. Culbertson. I mean, the state's regulations are here nor there on certain guidelines on everything.
But until we figure this out, I'm not going to vote for any more SUPs that rely on KDHE policing anything. So,
And we're restricted on, I mean, if KDHE is not enforcing the law, it's really hard to then put it down on the county level to say we're going to enforce environmental regulation. I mean, because we are not equipped. We don't have the resources.
we don't have inspectors. We don't have none of that.
So
we do not supersede them organizations.
Right, we don't supersede.
Exactly.
Yeah, but you know,
The state of Kansas, that's the
you know,
problem.
You know, years ago, it was a long time, years ago, KDHE you could count on. You called them in 10, 15 years ago, and I guarantee you
They would have done something.
they would have sliced and diced whatever needs. So maybe the issue, besides what you're saying, maybe the issue is contacting KDHE or whatever. I know they're blowing us off lately, and sitting down with them and saying, having a one-on-one with them and saying, hey, are you going to follow your own guidelines, or we're going to have to put something in to control that? Because they used, when KDHE was called in when I was a city administrator in Lansing,
Completely different.
that was totally different. People, eyes got this big around. We got to get back there. We're trying to solve their problems that you're stating, sir, but we need to have them involved on this to help us out with this.
And they were on, I mean, you know, my family had a C&D landfill on 16th and Spruce. And now it sits an empty lot right now. We lived across the street from it. And we maintained and our responsibility was to maintain it and to make sure that it was clean. And I let my kids play out, once it was covered and everything was safe. I mean, my children were allowed to play out on the landfill because there was nothing that was dangerous, nothing that we needed to worry about in that fill, ever. And never had any kind of issue. But KDHE was on us constantly to make certain that we were adhering to all of the terms of that permit. And so I don't understand why they have, if it's lack of staffing, if it's...
Well, I
Why
understand.
couldn't they come to a work session?
Well, I understand what you guys are saying, but what I'm getting at is I don't think that's going to happen, getting KDHE to do what they're supposed to be doing. So how do we address any of our SUPs that require a KDHE
I don't know.
I'm not so, I know you make the phone calls up there, but I'm not sure it's getting to the right people at KDHE who are seeing this. You know, the governor, I know we try to get hold of the governor and stuff like that. I think this conversation, whether they would come or not, KDHE should have been involved. You can put pressure on the state organizations to get them to come and sit down and at least talk to you.
KDHE is not, I mean, the thing is that you're saying no SUPs that involve KDHE. Well, you know, we've approved, and I don't think that there's a huge problem that anybody had with the dog groomer. You know, with, you know, things like that they actually have to sign off on in order to have that use permit. And I think that we've kind of determined, I don't know, but what I've seen is that if there are things that are, you know, for a special use permit, you know, the small mom and pop, non-intrusive and don't interfere with the neighbors or the character of the neighborhood and all those things, that it's just some small place.
And I agree, and that's why I say 99% of them aren't a problem.
Right, but we can't. But if we say no more SUPs, we're not going to. You know, nobody's going to.
Well, what I'm asking is, do we put in our SUP the regulations KDHE has for that specific business?
I don't.
And then
Unless we
how do we
have,
enforce that?
Well, we have to have the ability to enforce it. We have to have people that are qualified to do the inspections. And
If we put that in that thing, can we enforce it?
Commissioners, you can adopt by reference other other agencies' administrative regulations and rules. We do it all the time, shall comply with all applicable state, federal, and local regulatory controls. You don't need to spell them out in detail. But I have a question. Was the purpose of this work session the study of SUPs or a review of the comprehensive plan? Because I think you noticed it up as a review of the comprehensive plan.
Well, this was just one little piece of that.
No, this is a big piece.
Because the comprehensive plan deals with zoning, and so they brought up the spot zoning issue. So an SUP is basically spot zoning.
right.
We can reference them and adopt them, but as far as enforcement, they generally are going to belong to the parent agency. For example, we can reference IRS regulations, but Leavenworth County couldn't prosecute you under any provisions of the IRS code.
And we don't care about prosecuting, we just care about being able to revoke the SUP if they didn't follow rules that are under KDHE's regulations.
That you can do, Commissioner.
Okay.
And that's according to our current regulations. We have the ability, according to our own regulations, we can revoke, but I think this action against Flatlands, isn't that the first time the Planning Commission has acted?
But we need to.
I believe that matter's been resolved.
Yeah,
and
we need to talk about.
I would like you not to discuss it further in this forum.
Yeah, we just need to talk about.
But we're trying. We're not
updating
specifically
the
addressing that,
comprehensive
but just the fact that we have a process for revoking an SUP. We have a
That's
process.
well established.
But we need to continue by. My
think-
understanding is that the Planning and Zoning Board had recommendations for making adjustments to the comprehensive plan. Is that correct? I mean, I'm. That was my understanding.
And where this crosses over is zoning, spot zoning versus SUPs. Do
And that's
we want
the
to
only-
continue
is
with
that the only
SUPs, or do
concern?
we want to do away with SUPs and do more spot zoning on the comprehensive plan and the zoning?
But is that the only concern?
We all in possession of a copy of this here?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I guess on there we have 4 items that were bulleted for discussion
Right.
as part of this. And if we want to, look, we can work through the list.
That's what I think is
Yeah.
what would be the better thing to do. It's just in my opinion. So go ahead.
Sure.
Begin.
Item number 1 has to do with the regional transportation plan. We realize that that's not going to be completed anytime soon, like this year, early next year. However, we have some interest and some guidance on where we've laid out some thoughts in the comprehensive plan for areas that the regional transportation plan would be of impact, how we should be approaching any types of zoning requests, special use permits, et cetera, like that, that may fall of interest in those areas.
Kind of like we put a moratorium on the County Road 1 corridor for 10 years.
16 years?
Yeah, because the can was
Nobody
kicked
would
down
spend the
street.
money to do a corridor study.
Yeah, so we don't want to run into that again. We want to avoid something.
Well,
A moratorium shouldn't last any more than 5 years at the most, I think.
Yeah, we don't want to have that happen again.
if I could, the discussion of the strategic plan came up in relation to one of our cases involving a land use south of 70 down toward Linwood, a 250-acre plot that had requested to go rural residential 2.5. And it kind of highlighted, if you will, some of our concerns about the strategic plan. First being, it was agriculture, but it was RR5, and they wanted to go to 2.5. And so the question, there's a lot of RR5 out there, and I have a very short time on the board, but my time on the board has mostly dealt with converting RR5 to RR2.5. And so one of the questions about the strategic plan and the future land use was, why do we continue with the RR5s and not just look at everything into the future as an RR2.5, and if somebody wants a 5 or a 10 or whatever, then they come to that, and instead of automatically having to default to coming to a planning and zoning commission meeting and then come before you all to do a 5 to a 2.5. That was kind of one of our first points.
Especially when the comp plan says it's a 2.5 area, correct?
Right.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, it's because of the zoning map. So the zoning map and the comprehensive plan map are two completely separate things, but they're actually supposed to be the same thing. We're in a unique situation where they're not the same thing right now.
Right.
When they passed the zoning map that we have right now, which is a legal document, it legally defines where you can do what. That's adopted and that's set in stone legally. The comprehensive plan is not. It's what we think we want to do down the road. Doesn't match the zoning map, because if we were to adopt the comprehensive plan map and make it our new zoning map, where's David at? That would take hundreds of hearings. You'd have to have a public hearing on every single zone. Not every property, but every zone would have to have its own public hearing. So it just logistically doesn't work out to make the comprehensive plan the new zoning map. So we're going to have this fight for a while.
Okay.
What the answer is to that.
When somebody comes in and asks for 2.5 and the comprehensive plan meets it, the planning commission legally has to pass it. And then it comes to us, we have to pass it.
Yep, because the comprehensive plan is a legal document also.
It is also a legal document. I mean, I hope it is, because we spent enough money for it.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good, since you brought that up. Is the land use plan, and David's not here, but is the land use plan necessarily a rubber stamp, or do we still get to consider the various factors before we implement?
Can I answer that?
Yes.
Why don't you look up here, because they probably can't hear you.
Let me go.
Here, let me take this chair.
Okay.
Have a seat.
So yeah, the future land use map is a part of the comprehensive plan, and that is one of the 7 factors that both bodies have to consider when you're looking at a rezoning. But it is just one of the 7 factors. There are other factors such as what the neighborhood is zoned, what the neighboring uses are, would the potential rezoning cause any detrimental impact to the surrounding neighbors, their health, safety, welfare. I know you guys have all seen those. You look at them pretty regularly.
So it's not a rubber stamp.
It's not necessarily a rubber stamp. It is just one of the 7 factors that you have to consider when you're looking at it. If either body can determine that one of those other 7 factors isn't quite met when reviewing a rezoning case, you can use that as grounds to deny.
And they'll go right across the street, and we'll have a lawsuit, and we will lose.
Which is another aspect of why I like SUPs over spot zoning. Because you don't run into that as many problems.
Well,
That
you can
is
always
one
have-
approach to it.
There can always be a lawsuit, but just not to feel that we're obligated. We're not obligated as a rubber stamp. You guys are not a rubber stamp.
we try not to rubber stamp anything anymore. I think we got a bunch of new guys up here that I think we all agree on that we're going to look at every issue and use some common sense. And I mean, we just had an issue last week where we approved something 3 months ago, and then the issue came up that we're going to deny him now on a. Mr. Herring was here. Joe was here on that, and we just made a little zigzag in the line. And I think we all came together and thought, well, this shouldn't even be here. This should have been already approved, but our process of rezoning and then replatting that's a comeback at a different time, and we'll look at that again. Some of these issues could probably be taken care of in one deal.
If I might continue, that particular 250 to 2.5 brought up some of the other items on here, which included the transportation plan and sewer plan, because it was south of 70, north of the Kansas River, in an area that we think will get more use because of the plant in DeSoto, or at least we as a county may want to consider trying to get more use in order to put more housing and businesses in there to increase the tax base. We asked about because currently, and some of the complaints, or not complaints, but some of the witnesses against rezoning it brought up the transportation network, which is currently just mostly gravel roads down in that area. And the second was the sewer plan. You were going to have 100 plots, potentially with 100 houses, all on septic tanks. And so it led to the larger question when we got to the strategic plan and the land use plan. It got to the larger question of how does the transportation plan overlay the future land use plan, and how does and where and when are we going to focus strategic dollars on, or strategic effort on, sewers. And so that was kind of the genesis, at least of my discussion, was you have a land use plan here, you have a strategic transportation plan that we don't know about yet because it's not complete. We've heard discussions about sewer link-ups and so forth, and that's a whole different thing. And so from a planning board, me personally, from a planning commission standpoint, when I look at something that's going to put potentially 100 residences in there, which is a significant tax base, and what are we doing now in our future land use plan and in our strategic transportation plan and in our sewer plan to prepare for that, or at least prepare our thinking on that. And that was at least the genesis of my area of concern about the strategic plan.
And I think that's why we revisit the comp plan every year, because we folks had recently had a rezone on something that was 3 units per acre that was going to 2.5. And there's no way sewer is ever going to be out there on that property that was going to be 3 units to the acre. It's too far from the city of Tonganoxie, and it's not in their comprehensive plan to go out that way.
Well, that's an interesting third point down here, which was one of the other witnesses that spoke. I can't remember if it was for or against, but on a different piece, spoke about a piece of land that bordered Basar, and was being worked on by the county, and the Basar representative said they had future plans, and so the other question becomes, and it's up to us to go to their planning, but to also ask if we as a county are making a concerted effort to bring the cities in on our land use plan so that they can kind of give us some ideas where they're going.
So we asked the cities to give us a 3-mile radius urban growth area plan. Up to, yeah. And we didn't get a lot of interest back from the cities for that.
Well, one of them turned it
There
down.
was not a, yeah, there was no,
What's that?
Yeah, but I think one of them turned it down and the others followed because of what happened after talking to them.
No, Bayshore turned it down after there was a mob.
But we think that's a good idea.
Yeah, but Lansing was right.
Okay.
We agree with that.
I mean, I think there's things that we need to start talking about that, you know, if we're going to have subdivisions that are placed on septic systems, I think developers need to have the infrastructure kind of laid out forward thinking so that everything is there to tie into sewer should it come to that area. Because I think that it's important that whenever it's possible, that properties be tied into the sewer as opposed to using a septic system, even though, you know, they're, you know, extensively engineered perfectly and it's never going to be an environmental problem. I think that one of the things, and I think that in the permitting process, I don't know if we can in agreements
we're doing
to
it
say.
right now with the one on Kansas Avenue.
That's
right?
what I thought, but that we begin to, and you guys begin to have part of the requirements of when you're going to have that type of property developed, that any development that occurs includes a plan for tying into sewer systems if and when they get to that, to the boundary that is established, because eventually all of the cities are going to have to grow if they really want to
We're done.
thrive, but unless they're done.
That won't happen. You'll die if you're a city if you don't grow.
Right, so I'm just saying, so it's going to happen eventually, and we need to have the foresight to address some of those concerns in advance. You know, and the transportation and the road potential for roads going in and all those kind of things. We need to look at that. I mean, that's something that we really need to take into consideration.
And we had asked those questions of the developer as well as of David. You know, what can we require in the zoning process? Not much, other than put conditions on it. You know, but in the licensing or the permitting process, then to do that. But we got to. I guess our question was, if we put in a requirement that something like that is it backed up here?
Well, don't we already do that on a plat? There's going to be there's got to be a transfer, a study done on the impact, transportation impact. Yeah, so we already kind of do that.
Yeah, and I mean, to Vicky's point, we do require utility easements to be placed along subdivision property lines. So in the eventuality that utilities are extended out, there is a place for them to be located, if that's what you were thinking along those lines.
I think they should have to go ahead and lay the pipe, but that's no, I'm kidding. That's not reasonable.
Well, sort of along the same lines with this, it's not exactly the same, but when we have building codes and those building codes are in effect, and then a fire district, a fire chief comes and says, well, you don't need to have sprinklers, or you don't need this, or they really don't have the authority to override those codes. The codes are set like they are. So if you go above, I think it's 299, whatever the level is, then you're in that area. The fire chief can't say we waive the codes because it's county codes. Now we don't have an enforcement like a department to enforce it, but it's still the code. So for you guys, when you're looking at these cases, we have those codes, and they're meant to be followed if they're in place. So sometimes you get onto the place where it's like they're just a little above or a little below, or you don't know if it really applies or not. But if you have we do have a codes enforcement committee, and then the planning commission also has has the codes that we're following. So if you have any questions on that, they're the experts, not necessarily the chiefs. Sometimes they know the codes, sometimes they don't know the codes. Sometimes they're friends with, the developers, sometimes they're not. But the enforcement is what the rules are. You got to follow the rules. Everybody's treated equally. Everybody has to be treated the same.
I think when it comes like the plating, when you're talking about, say, fire hydrants, if the water district can provide it, they're installed. But if the water district says we cannot provide fire protection for this, we can't stop a plat just because they can't have a fire hydrant.
That's true, but you could have a...
What about the state fire marshal when you're talking about all this? They play a role in this.
Yeah, state fire marshal does have jurisdiction over the entire state. A lot of times if a local entity such as a city or county already has building codes or fire codes adopted, they will obviously they will allow that jurisdiction to administer the codes that they do have adopted, but there are certain regulations in place at the state fire marshal.
But isn't it we can have more stringent, but we can't have less stringent requirements, right?
Yes.
I mean, that's
as I understand
for,
it,
for
yes.
a lot of the things we can ask for more, but we can't. We can't
Make it weaker.
Make it weaker on a lot of the.
Wouldn't the water and the sewer almost basically go hand in hand now? I mean, if we're going to upgrade sewer systems to rural Leavenworth County, we got to have some water there to for these sewer systems. We can't have a 2-inch line running 100 homes. I mean, we just had this before us last week at our deal, an event center that should have had a sprinkler system in it, but there's only a 2-inch line going down the road in front of the event center. How are you going to put a system that requires a 6-inch line when there's no 6-inch line anywhere?
Well, my chief in Tonganoxie Township contacted me on that. There are systems.
Yeah, there's other systems
that you can.
We can use chemical.
You can have a tank, and you provide the protection. Now, my understanding of that case, and it hasn't come to me, and I haven't studied it deeply, but I think he's right on the edge whether it would be required or not. I don't. I kind of think he's right underneath, but my point on this is the fire chiefs cannot waive our county codes in these documentations. It needs to be enforced. I don't know if like Mike said or Commissioner Smith said through the fire marshal or who. We need to have some mechanism that if it's to enforce our codes.
I'll give you an example. A year ago, we had an event out in the county. Fire District 1 went out to it. The new chief had come on. And he made the rules a little, in my opinion, a little harder than what the county was. And so we pushed back a little bit. When we pushed back, he called the state fire marshal. The state fire marshal come out there with one of those few things that they can override. It said, no, the county, you can't do this. The state, the fire marshal has to be involved with this.
Okay.
And you talk about sewer lines. Guys, I built 2 sewer plants. Let me tell you, those babies are very, very, they're not like water things. They're very, very costly. So when you're doing things like you're talking about, the option should be, what's it going to look like in 20 years or 30 years? Not putting a 2-inch line in, but something we know is going to grow in that area. We got to have a conversation.
But that's rural water districts a lot of times.
I agree.
We have no authority over rural water.
Yeah, but when things come before us, we can say we're not comfortable with that, and we can look at it from that point.
Even if it meets a comprehensive plan, though?
What's that?
Even if it meets a comprehensive plan?
I'm sorry,
If it meets a comprehensive plan, we can still say no because of what the rural water districts.
I don't think so. I think that it's
comprehensive.
very clear that rural water districts are to provide potable drinking water. That's the state of Kansas. It doesn't say anything about fire protection.
Now, I may be wrong, but I thought the comprehensive plan is a vision, something we're trying to go to or get to. It's not the law. So the county commissioners look at that along with the planning commission's recommendations, and they decide what's the best fit. And as Doug was saying, that's why we look at these comprehensive plans every year, because I can guarantee you every time we update it, something's going to come along that we're going to have an issue with.
Panasonic battery plant.
There you go.
Now, what Commissioner Cause said, I think you guys can be the enforcer of that, and maybe not, the word enforcer maybe is not good, but guiding us through that, because we really do need to have it so in the future, when we do have sewer, that the subdivisions are able to connect. We can start molding our policy in that direction as we move forward, especially when we're going to have all these houses built in the southern part of the county. So, I think we need to think that all through. But what she said is a real important thing.
Well, we're not going to be in the sewer business. It's going to have to be the city's going to have to annex out and bring it in.
No, well, I'm not talking about. I'm talking about for the future. If you have a subdivision, like Commissioner Cost said, and it's all on septic, let's make it so that when we do go to sewer, it's easily
converted over from septic to sewer.
Briarwood,
And that's something that I think we have control
was
over.
built with septics on the. They figured in the future the city of Bayshore was going to annex that in and put sewer in. That was in 1986. It's not happened.
Well,
it's not going to happen.
Right, and it may never happen, but at least if we get a tremendous amount of growth in the south part of the county, we're ready if we did do sewer.
So are you saying if we approve a plat that needs to say if sewer becomes available, you will hook on?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's simple as that? I agree with that.
I think so. I think that's something that I think would be very useful, especially when you're making decisions, that is one of the requirements, that if it becomes available, you will hook on. And one of the things, because right now, what we don't have, we have no capacity financially to put in a sewer treatment facility in the county. That is not.
Nor do we want to.
No, I'm just saying that's something that we don't have, and so we also need to make sure that we continue to encourage development for all of these things and these requests from the cities moving out, not out in the middle of the county moving in. That our priority, in my opinion, needs to be to looking at what is happening within those narrow corridor boundaries from the cities. Whichever city it happens to be, that as things are happening, we need to really encourage and support all of the things that happen to come from, the cities coming out, tying into the cities.
So would we make it the city's responsibility to pay for the hookup to the subdivisions, or the homeowner's responsibility to hook up to the sewer? I mean,
the homeowners.
so we'll mandate that once sewer's available, that every homeowner in that subdivision has to pay $7,000-8,000 to hook up to the sewer.
Sewer would pay for the lines along the road. The homeowner would pay for the house.
To the line. And yes, I think that's a reasonable expectation.
A hookup fee.
There could be things too, like I've been part of when the septic tank fails, automatic. If you're within a certain fee, you will automatically look into that.
That makes a little more sense, because we've heard a deal where there was no water in front of the house, and the water company wanted $40,000 to run a line 500 foot. Who's got $40,000 laying around to go chuck up to a water line? Not every homeowner can do that.
Savings account.
Right.
But it's also being smart about where you decide that you want to purchase a property and build your home
Well, unfortunately, properties, it's cheaper in the south end, it seems, right now than anywhere else. So that's where all of our development's going to go. Plus, it's the next growth ring of Kansas City. It's just a sensible part of what's going to happen.
So, I think that developing some kind of policy along those lines is a good idea. I would certainly not want to have any kind of huge financial impact on a homeowner. So you're going to have to really look at that policy closely.
But are you guys comfortable with trying to develop something like that to look at?
Well, one thing I have a little bit of concern about, if I understood you right, is you want to have the developer plan on that ahead of time. Is that correct?
No, you can't. You mean put in a
easements?
Make it so that it's easy for that development to hook up to sewer.
No.
You can't do that unless the county and the cities have a plan that they can look at and say, okay, we can do this.
Right.
So be careful how you word that.
Right. No,
but
I agree.
if sewer becomes available.
Right.
And that'd be through an annexation anyways.
Yeah.
The city would annex it, and they're going to make you hook onto it anyways.
Well, they
do
can,
we sit down with the other cities? I know years ago we did.
they can waive it.
Do we sit down with other cities every so often and talk about the growth spurts or growth areas that we've got going, especially down south?
We still haven't met with Baser yet.
The city of
I
Leavenworth
do
waives
twice a
that
month.
requirement all the time.
You do, but we were going to meet like you did with Lansing.
They do have a planner now.
Well, I think we know who that is.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up.
You're on the hot seat.
Yeah. So, commissioners, most of this has been discussed in the last 5 years. We started out discussing whether or not we should encourage development around the cities where this infrastructure exists instead of encouraging it out in the middle of the county where it doesn't exist. And the county commission at the time, and that can change over time, but the county commission at the time said, we just want development. And whether it's in the middle of the county or up next to the cities, that's what we're going to encourage. So basically development in general. The challenges that come with that are no water, no sewer in some instances. Well, it's not up to the cities or the county or even the water districts to make sure that there's water to a property. It's up to the property owner who decides they want to develop that piece of property. We have rules in place that say you can have a well if you're on a certain amount of property, and I think that's the one that you're referring to actually, is they didn't meet that regulation because of something they did, not because of something we did. And in my opinion, we should have denied that and made them comply with our rules that are in place or change the rules, because I'm an all-for-one guy. If you're going to have a rule that you have to make an exception to, you need to change the rule or enforce the rule. That's just me. As far as the sewers extending and meeting with the cities, we've requested from each city to provide us with an urban growth area that they could then have a plan for. None of them took us up on that. So I think it makes it very difficult for us then to come back and interpret for them and enforce their rules that they want us to enforce because it's too unpopular for them to enforce themselves. And that's really what it came down to. So we have zoning, we enforce our zoning. If the cities want to reach out to us, there's a statute that allows it at any given time. We can encourage that meeting, and we have in the past. It came from us, and it went nowhere. So that's where that is.
Well, I'm looking for Marlon Lansing.
Yes.
I'm sure he'll be reaching out to you.
Requiring connection in the future, I think that's a good idea. I think the utility easements allow for that. I think we need to define what close is. When it's available, how close does it have to be before it's considered available? Is it 500 feet or is it 1,000 feet? Those are the kinds of things that absolutely should go through the Planning Commission. We would update our subdivision guidelines and make sure that that's included in any plat going forward. And I really think that's a great idea. But as far as the roadways are concerned, there are not too many instances where we would be able to afford to build a roadway and then hope that development happens on that roadway. So the development happens and then the roads are improved. We do a lot of our road improvements based on traffic count, much to the chagrin of certain districts who don't get new roadways because their traffic count's not changing. But that's how we do it. So if we have a comp plan, it's a plan. And that's what this is that we're talking about. It can change, which is why we don't really think it's a good idea to adopt it countywide, just to say, this is our comp plan and we're going to implement it countywide zoning and redo it. Because each year we review it and it could change. Property owners may want to change. That's why we get some of these SUPs in. But it is one factor. Amy stated that it's a factor that you can consider, but it's not the only factor. So no, you're not said, well, comp plan says we have to allow it. That's not necessarily the case, like the 3 units per acre instance. That's for future. When the city gets there and they have sewer, then 3 units per acre is what we'd support. But until that time, it's just a plan. And if the sewer never gets there, 2.5, 1 house per 2.5 acres is what we would allow then. So that's kind of my input on it. Always willing to meet with the cities on this. Always willing to hand that off to them if they are interested in taking it on, or working with them to match their plan with ours, probably more so than theirs than the other way around. So
they just lost their planner too, so
yeah, well, we lost ours, so
yeah, no.
But we're going to have somebody.
Thank you, Mark.
I think one of the things is just be sure you justify your decision based on those factors. Whatever. If you're going to depart from that land use plan and the comprehensive plan, you need to be sure that is documented and why you're doing it. because that's where the going across the street comes in.
Of course.
And don't make it because you felt that way or something. You know, my person, you know, it didn't feel like it.
Have we covered everything?
I think, I mean, the issues that were burning in my little tiny brain
I think
have
we've covered
pretty well
all
been
the items
covered.
here.
You think so? Did we?
I mean, the hard part about y'all's job is we get that ideally, in a planner's perfect world, you want to herd people toward the cities and grow from the cities down. We understand that. That's a planner's dream. And it's a good idea. But the reality is there's a huge appetite for people that want to live in the rural area on 5 or 10 acres. We can sell those all day long. The ultimate goal for all of this is to lower people's taxes. It's pretty simple math. If you're the only guy in your tax district, you're going to pay all the bills. If you add another house in that tax district, now you're paying half of the bills. You add another guy, you're going to pay a third. It's pretty simple. You got to find the sweet spot, though, between where the infrastructure outweighs what you're adding. Are you getting as much tax money as the infrastructure as possible? We're nowhere close to that being a problem. We've got to figure out, though, comprehensive plans that embraces that. If everybody that says we want to stay ag, we want to keep the county agricultural, me too. That's a great idea, but you need to also sign a waiver then that your taxes are going to go through the roof. And you said you wanted to keep it ag, though, so that's okay that your taxes are getting a lot.
But how are you determining that on property you don't own?
Exactly. That's the other flip side of this. Don't tell us what to do on our property, but we
Right, but we want to tell you what to do on yours.
That's
See,
the
so
flip
that's
side.
not going to work either.
Yeah.
So
I
it's
like
a free
the
country,
equation,
and you can purchase property.
I like the equation that you have two people that are each paying less. I've seen nothing but taxes going up, and houses going up.
And that's the problem. Until the state figures out we've got to shift more burden off of property taxes
Yes.
onto sales and income tax, we've got to figure this problem out ourselves.
We have
in
to
Leavenworth
listen.
County, we can't get commercial industrial in here. We've tried, and we're working on it, but it just isn't our time for that. We can sell the heck out of residential rooftops there. So we want to make sure we don't paint ourselves into a corner.
I think
Divide
you're
all
really-
these up into 5-acre tracts. Then when the city does move out there, you got all these estate lots where you can't make as much tax money off of them because everybody's on a 5-acre tract instead of a 50 by 100 foot lot.
If you had a lot more houses, maybe the price of the houses would go down, and the comparable sales would reflect that on your taxes.
Well,
Rather than happen.
I don't care if we built 1 million houses, the price isn't going to go down. I mean,
Well,
Well,
we've
if you built
got
a million, it would a little bit.
well, we've got a lot of
yeah, they're
There have
going
been
to
a lot of
have to.
scenarios where people were overpaying for houses, and then that's what they would compare somebody else's to.
Because of availability of
The
houses.
availability.
Yeah,
And they're
right.
overpaying asking prices. And so then all that does is make a comparable to someone who's not selling their house, and that's where your taxes are going to go up. So,
We do have a department now that's promoting industrial and commercial development in the county, though, don't we?
We've always had one. We've got one in the county.
Yeah.
Are the next phases of the county going dustless happening, or is that done? What, the
dust
Us
abatement
dust
rate,
abatement?
we don't have any
Yeah.
program right now. I mean,
'Cause-
other than what
No, that's
people are
not
paying.
happening.
Okay.
We paid
Because I get
$7
asked that
million.
a lot. I don't.
Okay.
$7 million worth.
No, yeah, it's what it is for that budgeted year, and then there's a, kind of a
The
priority
inflation
set.
hit us pretty hard,
But,
too.
Yeah.
I mean,
Kind of red 30s coming though. We got some other plans.
it is what it is. You had something?
But we do still subsidize that program for the people who pay to have it done. It's like $25 a foot this year, isn't it? 20. Yeah, it went up.
Commissioner, you had,
Matter of curiosity, so we're looking to try to develop commercial industrial. Is our focus supposed to stay with the industrial zones that we've established, or can we consider something that would be more like inner city, such as if something came along and also was made for something that would be part of a area that would be in the planned area of expansion for a city?
I think it's wide open on.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Anything and everything.
Are you talking about incentive programs or something?
No, just
If somebody comes.
Okay.
says that they'd like to have a rezone because they have this that's right up abutting to one of the municipalities and
Oh,
but
absolutely.
it's in the county and absolutely.
I think we're going to see a lot of the new industry and commercial and business that comes in is not going to be in industrial or industrial park that we already have designated to be that. A lot of it's going to come on private property that's not even in any of our list of inventory.
Okay.
I think.
And I think we're going to see that down south.
Well, and do we have a future plan on getting a building inspector for the county? I mean, because 2, 3, 4, and 5 have adopted building codes, but I continually see stuff on Facebook every day. Well, I'm built this structure. Well, 5-foot centers don't pass building code in any state I've ever been in.
Well,
So
they're liability-based building codes. They're not Johnson County style building codes. So if you convey a property to the gentleman next to him, if he finds a problem that you didn't follow the building codes and somebody signed off on it, now he can take it across the street to court to have it enforced. We're not creating a bureaucracy to enforce it, but we've created a legal method if there's a problem that it can be enforced. So it's a step that this county's not in a position to hire a bunch of bureaucrats to be running around inspecting properties. But we probably have to wrap it up because we got to go to this meeting.
Yep, sorry, we do. We have people that have to travel to
Does that mean lunch?
for transportation, actually, to discuss some of the issues with the Panasonic.
One major concern that I really have on the special use permits is the fact that every one of them that comes before us is recommended denial because it doesn't meet the comprehensive plan. Then we're sitting here trying to guess, does she really mean that or not? Should we pass this or does she? They should be able to make a recommendation based on the facts. That we have a process for special use permits. We shouldn't say that because it's not in the long range plan right now, that it should be denied.
Sometimes the denial recommendation is because it violates policy.
Okay. It's in a zoning district.
And so then they don't have the authority to do otherwise because their job is to make sure that
what you said. They automatically say that, and maybe there should be some leeway. I'm not saying there should be. I'm just saying they don't have it right now. They may even think differently, but they're trying to follow.
They're following policy and procedures.
Policy.
Okay.
That's a good point.
Well, then what should we do? Should we follow policy also and eliminate all special use permits?
So, what about on 2.5 acre rezones? Does staff always recommend approval because it follows a comprehensive plan?
no, they don't always recommend approval.
Well, then why would you recommend denial if it doesn't meet the comprehensive plan when 2.5 acres meets the comprehensive plan?
But I still
Why would you recommend approval?
I still like to know what the planning commission's thinking. We've got a couple of different hands on this. The planning commission, they know what they have to do with the guidelines. But when I'm looking at the planning commission report, I'm looking to see, is there something that's key in me that maybe I didn't know that is particular that we should be looking at, or maybe me to go a certain way on it? Because not all of them are the same. I mean, there's certain things that we can go by, but there may be something out there. We did, a while back, we did something on I forgot who that lady was on something, and we ended up passing it, even though we debated. But the planning commission, one or two members, I'm an old guy, so I don't know the name, about a year ago, put something on there that caught my attention. So when planning commission things are coming up before me, I'm reading all that stuff. I'm looking to see, is there a point on there? And there's a lot of documents about, is there a point on there that y'all are trying to make me make, because I'm not there. So I think I would continue doing that, my opinion.
You know, the thing is I think that what Mark said is that, we need to be aware and we need to pay attention, because there are times when we've made a policy or when we have, made a decision that upon further examination may not have been the best thing to do. And so that's where we need to have something given. But if it is, that's when we change. We come together and we try to adjust and make changes to policy, make changes to the comprehensive plan. That's why that review is there, is that there may be something that we missed along the way. We're not perfect.
We make mistakes?
Yeah.
Okay, just checking.
And so it's just to make sure. And then you guys, you do have the authority to go ahead and say, even though staff recommended otherwise, for these reasons, and when you line them out, this is the reason that we have made the determination that we've made.
And we read them.
We read those, and we may not always agree with that, but we try to our best to respect the opinions and the judgment of the Planning Commission.
And we're trying to make a policy. I mean, we don't always do this, but we've been trying to make it so if we don't agree with you guys, then it's coming back.
Right.
You've probably seen some more things come back to you. And
That's
there's a
just so
reason,
that you
we
can
want to
kind
know
of-
what you're thinking why we did that. So there's a reason, not that we're doubting what you're doing, but we may have some more questions and see what you're thinking that we may not have thought of. So that's the reason you see that.
So when you see them come back,
That's no disrespect. That's just that we
Yeah.
want to know, okay, is there something I've missed here?
We want to make sure we're on the same page.
Yep.
I want to throw one more thing out there.
You would, Joe.
It's about agricultural preserves, so it's more of a question. Would we want to maybe at some point look at adopting ag preserve in our zoning classifications? Have other communities done this on floodplain property? So there's three flood zones. There's 500 year, the 100 year, and the floodway. You can't build a residential house in the floodway. So could we maybe add in our zoning on the comprehensive plan all the floodway in a new zoning category called ag preserve? Because
But
you can't build on it anyway.
If
all
it's county
land.
property, but if it's private
Private
property,
property.
people can make that determination
Yeah,
on
they
their
can do
own.
whatever
There
they
is
want
a,
with it, as
there
long as they
I'm not
is,
talking about putting it in ag preserve. I'm talking about making a classification on the zoning map, so it's just zoned.
I just don't think
Call
that's
it
a good
something
idea,
else.
because
Call it
there's a
something
lot
else.
of thought that goes into, even for somebody that makes a decision that they make a piece of their property, then they have restricted that use for the generations to come. So there needs to be a lot of thinking that
Right.
goes into that, and so I don't think that's something that we want to enter into. I think that's something that
The property owner can
individual
do it.
property owners need to do.
Right, and I agree with what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. What I'm getting at though is it would not be changing. It would not actually be putting their land for them in ag preserve and limiting how they do it. It's almost like a taking. I'm just saying, can we come up with a new zoning category like have B3, C1, and all that? Call it A1 or something. It's agricultural preserve just on the zoning map. We're not legally.
Then that takes public hearings on every property,
But
on the
we're
zoning
making a
map. So you might as well
determination
just
that
go
that
to
is
2.5
what that needs to
acres.
be, and that's what I said. I think
You
that's
get a lot of more SUP requests.
right. That's just what I said. I think that's opening up a can of worms that we really don't want to open up.
Yeah.
I think that if people
Yeah.
want to have their property reserved, for the future, for environmental purposes, that they should be able to do that.
I meant on the
And that's-
comprehensive map, not the zoning map.
But
Oh.
and there is a process for doing that at the state level, and there is a department that will assist anybody that wants to do it. They love the idea.
We
for
should
some.
assist them if they want to do it.
And so that's the
But
way
I'm not really
that's.
talking about making it that. I'm just saying on the comprehensive land use map, could we call the land that's in the floodway ag preserve?
I think it already is.
Not actually.
Well, but that
Classified.
falls into some of the categories and requirements and things that go for the Corps of Engineers. I mean,
Right,
that's why
so
I
it's-
said, I just don't think that
Jeff,
that's
that ship's
something.
sinking.
I'm just saying, I'm not thinking that that's
What if the Corps of Engineers wants to make it a lake?
How often do we?
Yeah, they
how
can,
often
they
are we going
want
to
to.
do this? How often is this once a year meeting with the planning commission, or could we? I feel like this is very good.
We need to have this more
Get
than
on the
once a
same
year.
Page.
How often would you like to meet?
Every 3 months would be fine with me. I mean, we got a bunch of new board guys up here, and I think the board is changing as a whole. As probably, Alan's probably been on it longer than any of us now.
That's correct.
So we met in the evening time.
There's the boss, right?
Oh, okay. Jeff's been on it longer than any, and I think Mr. Rosen, Steve's been here for since before Leavenworth was founded. But yeah, Steve would be the senior member. But
I think that there's no reason we can't schedule a work session. And if it works better in the evenings, just don't have it.
Steve and Jade probably won't make a day meeting.
Right, that's what I said. If a quarterly meeting, in the evenings, just
Right
not
before
on
the planning
Tuesday.
commission.
Meetings, maybe.
quarterly would be great.
When I first started, we had meetings before our meetings. We had 5 o'clock downstairs.
And we could do that. I mean,
So it'd have to be right before your planning commission meeting.
Yeah.
So
Right before theirs.
Yep, that's work.
yes, let's go ahead and let
Jared,
everybody
we
know
want
when you work.
I want to say thank you. This has been very instructive.
Yeah,
Thank
for
you
me.
See you again.
Yes, I'm sure.
Thank you for
You
meeting
can count
with
on
us.
it.
Turn off the recorder.